And today, man, I'm so fired up for the conversation. This is Houston Open Golf Week here in Houston. A cool time. Could you ask for better weather and everything for part of that? And so our time today, we wanted to call it Golf, Life, and Faith. And as a part of that, our guest today is Matt Van Zandt. And Matt grew up here in the Houston area, went to Elkins High School, where he's a part of a state championship golf team. Then he went off to Texas A&M, where he was a four-year letterman on their team, three-time captain, and part of the national championship golf team with A&M. He was an academic All-American and just was a huge part of the golf world. Now he's on staff with a group called College Golf Fellowship, and he understands a lot about golf and life and faith. So would you welcome me and join in Matt Van Zandt? Matt? All right. You ready to go, Matt?
I think so. I'm ready.
All right. This is Matt. And Matt, this is, like we mentioned, this is a big week for Houston, big golf week. You've been out there on the new redesigned Memorial Park as a serious golfer. Kind of tell us what it's like and what the guys are experiencing out there this week.
Well, so as a guy who has a lot of memories from growing up on the old Memorial Park golf course, it's really hard to let go of the old golf course, but they've done a wonderful job of redesigning it. Tom Doak was the designer. And if you guys are kind of into golf course architecture, one of the kind of new ways in which they're building golf courses is everything is kind of closely mown around the greens. There's not as many trees along the golf course, and so they've taken out a lot of trees, which is in a lot of ways kind of sad. But the golf course is phenomenal. They've moved so much dirt, and they have pinched the fairways really tight this week, and the rough is brutal. So I'm curious to see, because it's a par 70, and typically a course like this, the pros would take it pretty deep, but the rough is brutal. So I'm really curious to see how it's going to be.
Oh, great. Yeah. So, as I mentioned a minute ago, you've got a serious golf experience, in your life. Before we get into your life, you have like a standout golf moment, like the shot, the moment, anything like that kind of stands out to you?
Well, the first one, one would just be, it's not that great of a shot. It was great given the circumstance, but I was like the semifinal match we played when we won the national championship in 2009. We played against Michigan in that match, and it came down to my match. All the other matches were done, and the guy hit before me, hit it over the green, which was just dead. And so I had, I don't remember how far I had, 130 yards or something out of the right rough, and I hit it up there about 15 feet. And then he made a debacle of the hole, which I'm really grateful for, because I didn't have to putt. But anyway, so that ended up being the defining match, which then sent us into the national championship. But I don't know, but probably the more defining one was the first time I ever made a hole-in-one in a golf tournament. My mom was up by the green. She was the only one by the green, and the pin was in a shadow, so I couldn't see it go in. But my mom shrieked when it went in. And I knew the rules official who was in that tournament, and I saw him on the next hole. He came up to me and goes, either you made a hole-in-one or somebody was murdered back there. So that's my favorite golf course.
Nothing like a mother's love.
That's right.
So I'll tell you my favorite golf moment, not for you, but for me. And I don't have many of them because I'm a hack and you're a player. But I was down at Moody Gardens last summer, and I was playing down there, and I just picked up with some guys and was going along. And on about the 13th hole, one of the guys who I think nickname was Catfish, he said to me, I know we don't know each other well, but, and then he used a couple of expletives to describe the quality of my golf game, right? So the next hole we walk up to is a par 3, 97 yards. I hit the shot, and I one bounce it right into the hole, right? And the other guy who's with us said, have you ever done that before? And Catfish says, look at that swing. You know he's never done that before. Humbled quickly. That's right. Yeah.
You still got it, though.
Yeah. So tell us about it. We're calling today golf, life, faith. So it's a little speculative question, but why in the world do you think golf is so attractive to guys? I'm sure that we have a ton of guys here who love to golf. What's the attraction, or what's the attraction to you? Why do you think it's so compelling in many ways?
I don't know. I wish I knew, but it sure is true. But I would say a few things. Is that it's a lifelong game. You can always play it no matter what level you're at. It's a social game, so you play with friends. There's a lot of conversation, which is one of the vital aspects of our ministry. Is that you have a lot of time to talk and get to know somebody and spend time with them. I think men are cultivators. We're created to be cultivators, and I think that. It's just your game. You just never arrive. You're always messing with it. In fact, I was cracking up. I saw John Thompson on the way in, and he was, man, you can't. One time I told John Thompson he needed to move to the up tees, so he's never forgiven me for it. And he said, man, I'm playing so good right now. You can never tell me I'm going to move back to move up to the up tees again. So, anyways, I just think that we're cultivating it, and it's just kind of a piece of art that you're always just fine-tuning and getting better, and you go through different seasons with it, and then it's outdoors, and I think it's an excuse to get outside.
Oh, that's great. I love that idea of cultivating and keeping going and never quite arriving, and just kind of keep growing and improving. That's beautiful. So before we get into your story a little bit, everybody wants to get better. So do you have like a great golf hack, a great secret, anything to pass on to the hungry masses here today?
Well, I think the secret is that there is no secret. I hate to tell you that. But I would say one little tip that I have had since I was, probably 13 years old, but I've always tried to make the first 6 inches of my golf swing very slow. So when I get tempo is a huge part of the golf swing. Timing is a huge part of the golf swing. And so I tend to get really quick, especially when you get in tournaments, you get under pressure, things like that. My tendency is always faster. And so if I can just find that if I can make the first 6 inches of the golf swing very slow, then my tempo tends to be a lot better after that. In fact, if you want to drill, sometimes I'll put, the ball on the ground that I'm hitting, and then I'll put my club and then another ball right behind it. And I just focus on pushing that ball behind it. And it helps me with my tempo. There's my not secret.
I love that. I think there's probably a great life lesson in there. The idea of intentionally slowing when the pressure makes you want to go fast.
How many guys are going to the range after this and are going to do that?
Yeah, I know. I was going to say that. We're going to see a bunch of guys with slow backswings out on the range right after this. Yeah.
I'm going to get some hate mail. It didn't work.
Good. Well, a lot of you guys probably know Matt. He's been here with Toolbox before. In fact, he sat in this chair and had the opportunity to interview some other guys in times past. But his story will be new to some of you. And so, Matt, why don't you just take some time and tell us a little about your growing up and how golf became a part of your life and where that's led and that sort of thing.
Well, first off, it really is an honor to be here. I really tried to get a tour player. There were all types of complexities this year with the Masters being next week. Guys are extremely sensitive this week with getting together and doing things because if they go on Monday to Augusta and test positive for COVID, then they won't play. And so they are extra sensitive this week. So anyways, I really do apologize for that. Moving forward, we will, it's going to be almost a shoo-in, assuming not another pandemic. But that we'll be able to do that. But it is an honor to be here and to be able to spend some time with you guys. I grew up in Sugar Land, Texas. Really, if you're a local, I grew up in Missouri City. That's Mo City. Nobody knows about Mo City. But my dad is a dentist right around the corner here over in Tanglewood. I always give a good plug if you need your teeth done. Thanks for funding all my golf lessons as a kid. But he's Tanglewood Dental right over here. So I grew up kind of involved in this side of town, but really everything was over there. And my dad is I like to call him a golf addict. He's yet to have a hole-in-one, which he laughs because he says 40 years playing 4 days a week, and yet he doesn't have a hole-in-one. This is not a just game. So he loves it. He's had a club in my hands since I was really young. As any kind of kid, I just loved doing what my dad was doing. I started to quit other sports when I was about 10 or 11 to focus purely on golf. And that was mainly due to the fact that I just found that I was better at golf, and I was 5'8" and couldn't jump that high, even though I loved basketball. It was in the cards that I wasn't going to play. So I just started playing a lot with my dad and grew up with a great love for the game. I went to a high school that took golf very seriously. In fact, I tried to go try out for the men's freshman basketball team at my high school, and my coach told me I couldn't, my golf coach, and I came home crying that day in ninth grade. So, but golf was taken very seriously, and we had a very good team. We finished 4th in state my sophomore year, 1 state my junior year, and 2nd in state my senior year. We had 3 or 4 Division I golfers that were on my team throughout those years, and so I was around a lot of success and successful golfers. I had a kind of a community guys that were playing. I really wanted to go to a big school. I was kind of from a recruiting standpoint, I was the top tier middle of the road school recruit, and hoping for the Division I big school route. And so basically, I could have gone to a lot of schools like Sam Houston or North Texas or even University of Houston at the time, which was more of a middle of the tier school. But I really wanted to go to a big school, and so it came down to going to Texas A&M or Arkansas. Decided to go to Texas A&M. Loved it. Loved every minute. My brother was there. I would say took me a while to kind of get my feet under me in college from an athletic standpoint. I played probably half the events, but thankfully my last 2 years I played really well, and we won the national championship in 2009, which was the first year that it moved from stroke play to match play. And the reason that we won is because I had really great teammates, because I was definitely not the stud on that. So played with a lot of guys along in college on my own team who are still playing professionally, a couple that are playing this week. And then also playing alongside. We played in wonderful terms. I mean, I played alongside Ricky Fowler, Morgan Hoffman, Peter Uihlein, Billy Horschel, Webb Simpson. I mean, you pretty much name it. All the guys that are about that age, we pretty much played with. And so I got exposed to a lot of really good golfers along the way. And people always ask, why didn't you try and play? It's interesting how the culture of pro golf has changed, even in being graduated now 11 years. When I would say if there were 20 teammates that I had in my 5 years in college, because I was there 5 years, I redshirted 1 year, I would say maybe, 10 of them tried to play pro. Now, if there's 20 teams or 20 people that you had teammates with, like 19 of them play pro. So it's the culture of pro golf has completely changed. But I mean, I had a job lined up with PwC right after college. I did an accounting program, and I was exhausted from the grind of golf, and so I didn't even really think about trying to play, and went and, to tell you how tired I was, I went and took a job in audit. That's what I always tell people. So
that's great. Well, before you took the job as an auditor, I'm guessing that if we were just looking at you from the outside, here you've been one of the best guys on your team, through high school. You're playing Division I golf. You happen to be a part of a national championship team. You're not just playing good golf. You're obviously making good grades. You're academic All-American. You're doing those kind of things. So I'm guessing as a guy's looking at your life, Matt, you're looking from the outside, we're going, you've got it all going on, right? But today we kind of said this is golf, life, faith. So I'd be interested just for you to tell us a little bit about not just what was your golf pathway, but in the middle of that, what was what were the things that were going on that were shaping you as a man and launching you for your life?
I grew up in a great home. My parents are really great. They've been married for over 40 years. There were 4 kids. I would say I grew up in a very normal home is the word I would use. The only kind of abnormality is that my older brother was born with muscular dystrophy and was bound to a wheelchair 5th grade. He actually passed away in 2011 at the age of 29. But I shared a room with him my whole life until he went to college. And so, but it's funny because I know that's abnormal now, but when I was living it, he was just my brother. And so it didn't really feel like it was impacting me, although it probably was. I just didn't feel it. But I kind of grew up like the all-American kid. I was social. Could talk. Teachers loved me. I had no problem making friends. I was athletic. I played. I kind of joke. I always use my little league experience. I always say, in little league, I was good enough to make the all-star team, but I rode the bench on the all-star team. So. Was I good? I don't know. It depends how you define good. But I always was just in the upper echelon of athleticism. Let's just put it that way. and then I made good grades, so I just kind of in a lot of ways thought, well, that's how you win over people's approval. Is it like, I mean, where am I going to lose in this game if I'm knocking all these out of the park? And then I would say there was just a defining moment where things began to change for me. I say this very humbly, please know this, but in 7th grade, I would, so it'd probably be 13, is that about right? So that would be 21 years ago. I still remember where I was, who I was with, and what I saw the first time I was exposed to pornography. My parents didn't talk to me about that stuff. I didn't know what it was, and I remember this one moment where I had stumbled upon this with some friends, and I thought I had found a gold mine. Truly. I thought, wow, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Well, as you imagine, I didn't run home and tell my parents that I had seen that. So I kind of, as you kind of learn, as I learned the game, that's what maybe I'll call it, a game, I learned how to indulge in this, and yet in the private of my life, and yet nobody knew about it. So that began what I would just say a silent addiction. I use that word loosely. I know that word has strong connotations, but a silent addiction to just pornography for years. And really, it didn't come into the light until my sophomore year in college. And so you just imagine what a silent thing like this, what it does just to your soul. I thought I had found a gold mine. Probably a year later, I started going, man, I really hate that I'm doing this. I don't like this. I don't like the way it makes me feel. And then in my freshman year in high school, I got involved in a ministry called Young Life, which is a wonderful ministry. Probably many of you guys are involved in it here. And I went to camp, and they told me about this guy named Jesus. And I'll never forget, one of the first verses I ever learned, and I still can remember it to this day, is 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old is come, the new is gone. Or the new is come, the old is gone. The old is gone, the new is come. Yeah, there you go. And it was just this simple idea that Jesus Christ could make me new. Now, I didn't grow up in a home that talked about the wonders and the mysteries and the glories of God. That was all foreign to me. I literally asked a guy at camp that week, I feel like we made all this stuff up about God. But I was in a place so desperate that I just said, if God can make me new, I'm in. I mean, that was about the extent of my faith. God can make me new, I'm in. And so that week I gave my life to the Lord. Looking back, I had no idea what I was getting into. I came back, thought I was never going to sin again. Thought, man, my life has completely changed. I'm just going to just walk in righteousness the rest of my life, right? And needless to say, that didn't happen. And so I came back, floundered really hard in my faith, just didn't really know, started to even question, man, was that thing that I thought it was so real, and now I don't know if what I had actually experienced. And went into college, had kind of made a mess of high school, and went into college looking for kind of a new start. And I got involved with this ministry called College Golf Fellowship. A guy named Brad Payne, who's our president, he came down to A&M my freshman year, and he said, hey, you guys can come to Ben Crane's house. If you guys don't know who Ben Crane is, he's a longtime PGA Tour player. He had just won the 2004 Bell South Classic, doesn't even exist anymore. And he says, you can come to his house at Vaquero in Dallas, which is a sweet place. We're going to go play Vaquero. There'll be like 50 other college golfers. You're going to stay in a PGA Tour player's house. And we're going to go eat Babe's Chicken, which if you've never eaten Babe's Chicken in Dallas, it's awesome. So me and a car full of teammates and friends and stuff, we drove up there, had a great time. And there's a guy named Todd Wagner, a great pastor out of Dallas. And he got up and he taught out of the scriptures in a way that I had never heard it. And one of the things I always say, it's for shock value, but he showed us in 1953 Centerfold Playboy magazine. And literally it was less than what you would see on a billboard in Houston. His point is just the ever-growing promiscuity in our culture. And I mean, as he was talking, and he's just talking about the realities of what sexual morality was and is, and what it does to a soul. I mean, it was like everybody was leaving the room, and it was just he and I were having a conversation. I mean, I just felt like he was talking directly to me. And so, sure enough, here we go. You know, I can just tell, man, I need to tell somebody about this. This has been going on now for whatever, 13 to 19 maybe or so that'd be 6 years. Nobody knew about it. And me and my best friend are driving home, and he was kind of in the same place. And you could just imagine how hard it is for a soul to begin to unveil the realities of just the layers upon layers upon layers of shame of I hate, because what I had lived for was my image. I love people come up, man, Matt Van Zandt, he's a great guy. Man, that was like oxygen to my soul. I needed that, right? And so here I was about to just destroy all of the image that I had ever created by telling somebody. And anyway, so I laugh now looking back, because here we were, two immature 19-year-old kids driving back, both just getting wrecked by what this guy had said. And we're like, hey, you know what? What'd you think about that? Oh man, that talk was so good. Oh, it was good. Yeah, I thought it was good too. What'd you think about that stuff on like lust, right? And of course, you wouldn't use real language. You got to use like, you know, just real high level language. And he's like, oh yeah, you know, every once in a while I struggle with that stuff. You know, just every once in a while though, right? And I look back and I think, man, how cowardly that I just couldn't come out and say the reality of what was going on in my life. But here I sit in this seat now and look and I say, but the Lord was building courage into my soul. I had been a coward, and I still am a coward in a lot of ways today. I can see in areas of my heart, but the Lord began to build courage into my soul, and that was life-changing for me. And the reason was that I had heard and talked about, just like you guys had heard, that Jesus Christ forgives sinners. That I could be a broken sinner before God. I knew that. But what I learned is that I could also be a broken sinner before others, and that I could live my life in the light. And I mean, from that moment on, I would say that my life, I mean, I've matured. Obviously, things have changed significantly in my life. But I really don't do my life a whole lot different. I have great friends. We spend time in the Word. We talk about it. We share our lives, both good and bad, you know, and it's still hard, whatever that is, however many years ago that was, 15 years ago, gosh, that's humbling. 15 years ago, it's still hard today to share my life, the broken, shameful areas, things I'm not proud of, but I strive to do it. Why? Because there's life there. There's no life in the dark. And so I would say, looking back, I mean, that's really kind of the bread and butter of my story, was just the Lord's kindness to me and his patience with me in an everlasting struggle with something that was not talked about in my home at all, but seemed like, I mean, it was so every day right here at the end of my eyelids to what I was experiencing.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that expression, building courage into your soul. I think sometimes we just kind of think that there's guys who have it and guys who don't, and that idea of it being sort of a construction process, you know, in our lives. Yeah, I really love that. So thank you for that. Yeah, great. So that's a big, huge part of your life. So tell us a little bit more. You know, I'm guessing that you talk about image. You know, we've all heard of people who struggle with image things, but thankful that we don't.
Yeah.
But thank you that you admit
Maybe
that you
some
do.
of these guys in the audience too.
Yeah, exactly. But tell us, you know, I can only imagine actually being a person who's playing a D1 sport. It's a competitive world. There's people watching. I'm guessing that being in that world had lots of opportunities to have a kind of a shaping influence on you, the pressures of it and so forth. In fact, one of the things you had told me earlier is you said you were always around people who were more talented than you. Kind of that idea, I'm on the all-star team, but I'm on the bench. I've always been around people more talented than me. Just a little bit about like how that might have affected you. How do you deal with that kind of the pressures and so forth? Go with that.
Well, I mean, our culture values strength. I mean, you guys know about names like Tiger Woods. You know about names like LeBron James. Our culture values strength and talent and gifting. And that's not, I don't want to squash that and say that's all a bad thing. I mean, those are wonderful gifts that they have, but we exalt those people. I mean, people pay insane amounts of money to get in front of those people, which one of the things I love about working with PGA Tour players or getting to spend time with them and knowing a lot of them now, you just start to realize they're really not that impressive. So when I see what people pay to get in front of them, I'm like, man, that was a waste of money. But anyway, so I think, but as a immature kid growing up, I valued all that. I thought, well, this is what it would take to get what I want, which was for people to think that Matt Van Zandt is one of the greatest, right? And so to leave a name, to leave a legacy, and really at the end of the day, it's about the exaltation of self, about the exaltation of me. And so I was always around that, and I would say that had been like a hamster wheel I'd been running on for a long time. I tell this story. It's so embarrassing to say this out loud, but I wanted, when you're a junior golfer getting recruited, one of the measures of your worth is how much scholarship you're going to get. So here I was going on a recruiting trip to Texas A&M, and I was so excited. I'm like, hearing all my buddies, oh yeah, I got 50% offer here, I got 60% offer here, 70% offer here, and I go and I sit down with JT Higgins, my coach, and he says, hey, so what I can offer you is a book scholarship. It's $800 a year, right? And so if you do the math, it's something like 3%, right? And so all I can think about is, what am I going to go tell my friends? What A&M offer you? Oh, books, right? But really looking back, what he did in that moment is he told me how much I was worth, right? And that's why that hit me between the eyes. And so the embarrassing part of this is like, I went to Arkansas, they offered me like 25%, and I called Coach Higgins, and I was just like, hey, is there any way you could just offer me a little bit more money? Here's the thing. I had a wealthy aunt who didn't get married till really late, so I had a college fund set up. I did not need the money necessarily. It would have been nice, but it was not like a pressing need. This was not going to dictate which college I went to. It was purely because he had just valued me, and I did not like what he said, right? And so I think being over time, though, that's I still feel that in this room. I'm probably like, gosh, I bet everybody's salary is about another 2 commas away from mine or something like that, right? And so I'm always measuring myself up against people. And so I think through college, though, as I started to grow and as I was around it, I started to appreciate other people's gifts. I started to want to serve them, and instead of just coveting them and envying them, I just appreciated it, and I tried to learn from them. And I'd say this story real humbly because it means a lot to me. It's not really going to mean that much to you, but it means a lot to me. There was a time where I didn't make our conference team one year. And that's to go play we're in the Big 12 then. Kind of miss those days. But and I was going to stay home. And so at that point, everybody was free to go. And I just remember I went up to a good buddy and said, hey, how can I help you get ready? And I literally went and shagged range balls, wedges we had like a practice hole, and I shagged them and kind of called out yardages to him. And I just remember in that moment, I was just really proud in the right way. I was really proud of the fact that I had done this, because in that moment I was saying, I'm going to die to the disappointment of what I'm experiencing right now, but I'm going to consider what you're going through. I'm going to consider that better than my disappointment, and I want to come alongside you and serve him. And man, I just started to realize very quickly that, man, that's where life is. It wasn't about the exaltation of self, it was the lowering of self. It was not about making much of my life. It was about giving my life away. And in fact, I was saying something to somebody the other day, and they were like, man, how hard is it to have a kid? I have a 13-month-old named Annie. And I said, you know what? When the basis of your life is giving your life away, and that's just what you're going to do, the next question is then just to whom do I give my life away to? And having a kid isn't that bad when that's the basis. But if the basis of your life is that I make much of my life, well, then a kid is going to be a giant inconvenience to that, right? And so that is what I started to learn in those moments. And then, by no means do I want to paint a picture that I do all that well. If my wife were here right now, she would say, you are making way too much of yourself because you are not that good. But I think that going back to that, putting courage in my soul, is that the Lord is not done with me. That when I was 15 years old and I came to Christ, I was a mess. Right? And he didn't just, wash me up, kick me out the door and say, good luck. right? But that he's just been so unbelievably patient and good to me. And so I just have started to see that, and laying my life down and serving, that's where life is found.
I love that. In fact, one of the things you told me is one of your favorite verses out of the Bible is 1 Thessalonians 2:19. It says this, For what is our hope or our joy or our crown in which we will glory in the presence of the Lord Jesus when he comes? Is it not you? And that was the guy who wrote that, talking about the people whose lives he had built.
I love that because, I mean, Paul is literally saying that when Christ comes back and on Judgment Day, like when he descends from the heavens, that what Paul is saying is that he's going to point to all those people that he invested in and say, look how well they're doing, like with a father's love. And as men, one of the things that I have a heartbeat for with young guys is that we were meant to be multipliers. And so we are all just meant to take younger people under our wing and to say, hey, you're mine. And I want to just glory in how well you're doing. And so one of the joys about my job is that while we work with college guys, that is true. It's really a lifelong relationship after that. I mean, I get to do weddings, and a couple of my guys have had kids now, and it's just so fun. And, I get to stand up at a lot of weddings and just get to share what they were like their freshman year of college and go, man, how sweet is this? You are doing well. You married a godly woman. You guys you have your life ahead of you. How sweet is that to just see the goodness of God and how somebody else is doing? And I think that's what Paul is really getting at, is that his crown, his glory, the thing that he boasts about is how his people are doing.
I think it's kind of cool. The note I jotted down when you told me that back some time ago was working for a different kind of trophy, right? And I think that's part of that strand of getting beyond success into significance, right? You're doing something that's going to outlast you, right? Now, is that something of what led you into what you're doing now when you came back out of the business world and went into College Golf Fellowship? Tell us just a smidgen about that, and then we're going to bring it in for landing and see if anybody has a couple questions, okay?
So College Golf Fellowship is simply a ministry that exists. We work with, I think our mission statement actually says that we desire to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to the world of college golf. And so you guys in here, you all know what that means, is like the real estate world is not just guys who buy and sell real estate. There's all these people that are involved in that process. Same thing with college golf, right? And so we work with, it's a ministry that birthed out of the PGA Tour. The PGA Tour has been around for probably, 70 years or so, and there's been a traveling church, faithful men who've chaplained out there for years. And it started off simply as, hey, we're going to come to Houston Open. We're going to call the University of Houston Cougars and say, hey, did any of your guys want to come to our study here? And they're welcome. And all of a sudden they started to gain traction because college kids wanted to go because they were going to get to meet a tour player. And so that's simply how it started. And then a guy named Rick Massengale, some of you guys may know his name, played Texas, won a couple times. He got injured, and he kind of took this idea, or took all these relationships and then ran with it and kind of birthed College Golf Fellowship. And we've been through different iterations over the years, but that was like 1980 that it was birthed. And now we have 27 staff all over the country. My two of my bosses are chaplains on the PGA Tour. I'm the chaplain on the Korn Ferry Tour, which is essentially the AAA baseball of the PGA Tour. It's the feeder tour into the PGA Tour. And then I work with Rice, U of H, and Texas A&M. Those are my kind of three college teams. I have another counterpart here in Houston, who he would be here, except for he got exposed to COVID. So we serve kind of the greater Houston area, but we are all over the country. And when I graduated college, I worked in audit world and was still serving Rice, U of H, and HBU on the side whenever I had free time, which, as you know, as an auditor, it's not a whole lot. But I just kind of, it was just the heartbeat. I just loved it. I was doing it in my spare time as a single guy. And then they were looking to expand, and so I came on in June 2011, and it's been great. That's basically, if I know you in this room, very likely it's somehow through the game of golf. And so I've loved it. I'm coming up on my 10-year anniversary, which is kind of humbling to say, but it's been a really, really good ride.
That's great. Thank you. So if you guys have a question, here I want to say one more thing, and then see if anybody has a question for you. Just a minute. Jim, thank you. But one of the things that it says on the College Golf Fellowship website, I like this, and I won't turn this into a question. I'll just make it a statement here right now. But it says this, that their heartbeat is, we want you, that is the reader of that website, to understand what a genuine relationship with God looks like and how it's different from what most people think of when they hear the word religion. I love that heartbeat, because in many ways, religion is some picture of what I am going to do, what I am trying to do to gain a relationship with God, as opposed to the heartbeat of God's Call Fellowship is to help people understand what God has done for us in and through the life of his Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, who surrendered his life on the cross that we might be forgiven and be given a new life and becoming a new creature, just the way you mentioned, Matt. So thank you for that. Yeah. All right, Jim, you got a question. What would it be?
Well, I do want to commend. There's been a lot of stuff written on this, and they've come along. The church has come a long way. And I don't say this as a critique, so please don't hear this. But I think our older generation don't fully understand it because the digital age wasn't here then, and so it was a lot harder to get access to. You had to go embrace your fear of man when you would walk up to a counter and buy a video or a magazine, and actually have to face somebody who looks at you and goes, "Why are you buying this?" Right? But now it's in the private of the room. So I think there was a disconnect there where parents didn't communicate well to kids, and I don't. You could say it's on the responsibility of the parents, and maybe in some ways it is, but I think that there's been so much that's come out now. But I will tell you, I think the best way to do it is to be honest about your own life with it. The best way that I can get into a conversation about it with my guys is share my story. Say, hey, this is what I wrestle with, and it's amazing to me how easy I can talk about it. Oh yeah, like 5 years ago, I really wrestled with this. It's a lot harder to say, man, last night I was tempted. It's really hard. Shame is so much closer in that moment. And so with I have a daughter, and we hope to have more kids, but that's one area where my wife and I, it's hard. It's really hard, but we just want to be super open to just say, hey, this is the reality. These are real temptations. And so I think for me, I would just say it just starts with sharing your life and not acting like we are I'm the almighty one who's never had to wrestle with any of this stuff.
Right on. I think that openness and accountability, the courageous step to invite somebody else into your world with anything that we're battling is such a breakthrough moment. So, yeah, thank you. Yeah, John. Thanks.
I didn't know I was gonna cry. I love my daughter, truly, and I would say that one of the things that I have learned as a father is just how much she looks up to me, which sounds great, and it is great. Don't get me wrong, I love it. Also, just a terrifying responsibility. Because I know myself, right? Like, in some ways, I want my daughter to marry a man like me, but in some ways, I want her to marry someone so much better than me. Um, and so, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I should be the one asking you that question, right? Like, I'm in the muck, so I mean, we're dealing daily with it. But I would just say that for me, I just never want to break that line of, it's not even just a line of communication, but I just always want to know that she can come to dad. I know I'm going to blow it, which is, I don't know if she's not old enough yet to know that I've blown it yet. But I know that's coming, and yeah, it's wonderful though. It's such the affection, even the affection that I have for her right now, just to think that that's just a glimpse of how God views me, that blows my mind. I just don't think like that.
Love that. Thank you. Yeah, great question. Anything else before we wrap up, fellas? Yeah, come on. So the identity and the image of a man in culture, particularly when it's kind of under attack or being caricatured in different ways. Yeah, for sure.
I think the scandalous part of Jesus Christ is that if he walked and lived right now, there would be many of us in this room that we would probably not say very nice things about him. Truly. He lived in a way where just the light was just never really shone upon him. Even though the irony, he was the light of the world, right? That's John 14. But it just that he would stand in the face of our sins. He would stand square-shouldered and look at us, and he would call it what it is. You are greedy, right? You are prideful. You think too much of yourself. He would do that, but he would do it with a fierce love. He would do it not with a desire to condemn you, but with a desire to liberate you. And so, honestly, the only reason I go down that answer I go down that route is that I think that being a godly man is that oftentimes that there will just be a lot of times I just think that people aren't going to want that life, right? Because it's going to be a life that deflects all the glory, a life of true humility, a life under the radar. And that just like me, I'm saying this to myself, that just wars against my pride. That wars against my desire to make much of my life for everybody in here to think, guys, you hear Matt Van Zandt, man, he's so great, yada, 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 right? And at the end of the day, it just is hard. I mean, the Bible says that, just so you're encouraged. The Bible says that's a hard fight, so just be encouraged. It's hard to fight yourself. But man, there's good life there. And so I think rather than worrying about changing the image, just go be that man. And then just let the chips fall as they do. So.
Good answer. That's a great question. It's so interesting. There's a verse, because there's a culture that always has its bias. And there's in Psalm chapter 31, verse 20, it's a prayer in there. And it says, you will keep him in the secret place of your presence, far from the conspiracies of man. You will protect him in your presence from the strife of tongues. People are going to think and say what they do. I would say for all of us is keep kind of rejecting passivity, to take on needful roles of leadership, and to keep embracing servanthood in our lives as much as we can. Yeah. All right, last question, then we're going to wrap it up. Dwight's going to come close.
Bruce.
Come on.
Great question.
Question was, who are some Christian leaders in the PGA Tour?
First off, man, I want to commend my bosses and even men before them. There's some godly men on the PGA Tour. I would tell you right now that Webb Simpson could go he is an elder at his church, but he could go and be a pastor right now. I mean, he is just phenomenal, loves people, just an awesome dude. But just across the board, I mean, Zach Johnson's a wonderful guy. Davis Love's a wonderful guy. Cameron Tringali, Russell Henley we've had here. Drawing a blank now. But Ben Crane, But I mean, there are probably about, no joke, probably 40 to 50 tour players who are involved. And I use that word loosely because involved is, they're involved with what we do in the golf world. And they're just some godly guys. But I always like to just talk about Webb because some people call him the Tim Tebow of the PGA Tour. But it truly is. I mean, he is just a godly man.
That's cool.
So I just wanted to I'm reading this book called Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortland. I highly recommend it. But it just says this one thing. The book is basically that there's one part of Scripture where Jesus talks about his heart. And in the Bible, the heart is basically the core of who you are. And so Jesus says in Matthew 11, it says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." But he says this. He says, the point in saying that Jesus is lowly is that he is accessible. The minimum bar to be enfolded into the embrace of Jesus is simply open yourself up to him. It's all he needs. Your very burden is what qualifies you to come. This is who he is: tender, open, welcoming, accommodating, understanding, and willing. And then he goes on to say this, but this is not who he is to everyone indiscriminately. This is who he is for those who come to him, who take his yoke upon them, and who cry to him for help. And so I don't know where you guys are in regard to your relationship with Christ, but I always knew that I just viewed him as like the dad who sat in the chair across the room with his arms crossed. And if I would just get my stuff together, man, then he would open his arms up to me. And that is just a lie from the pit of hell. And truly. And so I just encourage you guys with that, is that I have no idea where you are, but open yourself up to Jesus Christ. He is wonderful. He's the greatest thing you could ever possess.
Right on. Perfect. I love that. How about a big hand for Matt Van Zandt? Yeah. Thank you so much.